Good morning, everybody. I want to thank you for coming out. My name is Jeff Schrader, S-H-R-A-D-E-R. I'm the Jefferson County Sheriff. I'd like to introduce a few people here to my right that will be speaking in a few minutes. But before that, I'll be making some opening comments. First of all, Investigator Elias Alberti, he's my chief cold case homicide investigator. Mitch Morrissey, former Denver District Attorney and now the owner of United Data Connect, and then also a longtime friend of mine, Mike Mills, who is the president of and board chair of Denver Metro Crime Stoppers. There's probably several storylines. I guess one of them that we could go with is that we're violating the fire code in this room right now, but I'm the fire marshal, so we're okay. But there's several storylines, and I understand that one of those is that this is perhaps the first genealogical DNA match in solving a cold case crime in Colorado. There's also the storyline of public and private partnerships. There's also the storyline of the work that has gone on from Elias Alberti going back 38 years for various investigators and professional staff that have been involved. There's also the story of what goes on in a crime lab, and in this case, multiple crime labs with multiple professionals. But the real story is about Jeannie Moore and her life, the life that was taken too short. And I can't help but think when I hear about this case and have had briefings from Investigator Alberti, that where was I in 1981 when this occurred? I was about the same age, and I know the area well because where she was last seen over near the old Lakeside Mall. And so I think back about some of the opportunities that I've had over the course of those 38 years, and I'm sure that it is a very sad time to reflect for Jeannie Moore's family about the opportunities that she lost. We are committed, and we are very pleased that this case is solved, but we're committed to the numerous other cold cases that we have. 38 homicides, 7 missing persons, and 2 unidentified remains. Those are the totality of what we have, and I know other organizations have many more that they have. Our commitment is bringing closure for all of those families. Today, again, we are focused on Jeannie Moore and her family and bringing justice for her, and we've been able to do that. Again, I mentioned the public-private partnerships, and here in a little bit, both Investigator Alberti and Mr. Morrissey will be talking about the process of that and how we were able to utilize genealogical DNA matching to resolve this case. When there is a match, we only pursue that as a lead. It is not the final answer. There is much more work that has to be done when a match is made in order to verify. And in this case, that match leads us to the conclusion that the suspect, who I'll identify here in just a moment, was 3.3 trillion times more likely than anybody else to be the suspect and now the perpetrator in this case. Donald Perea was 23 when he kidnapped Jeannie from the area of I-70 in Harlan, sexually assaulted and killed her. Donald Perea, who was born November 2nd of 1957, died in May of 2012. He was 54. He died due to health issues. Jeannie Moore, she was 18 years old, and she was found approximately 3 weeks before her 19th birthday. In fact, her 57th birthday would be next Monday. She lived with her mom and 2 sisters near the area of 48th and Depew, not too terribly far from where she was kidnapped. Her mother has since passed away. She has 6 siblings. Some of them we don't know where they are, but we have been in contact with some of her family. While, while her family is pleased that the killer has been identified, they're still struggling with memories and the pain this discovery has brought back, and we are mindful of that. They have asked that we share a brief statement. We would like to thank Jeffco homicide detectives for all their hard work. Jeannie Marie Moore was loving and kind in all her ways. She was sincere and true in her heart and mind, and she has left behind beautiful memories. I'm going to have Elias come up and take this over. I would ask that we hold questions till we get to the end of all those who speak. And again, thank you for being here today.
Well, thank you, Sheriff. Thank you guys all for coming. I appreciate you guys all attending. What I'm going to do is just talk a little bit about a brief overview of the case and how we got to this point. Back on August 25th of 1981, Jeannie Moore left her home on Depew Street at the 4800 block and went to work. She generally would hitchhike to her place of employment at 13th and Wadsworth, and she would walk down the street to a gas station in the area of I-70 in Harlan, and that gas station actually is still there. Witnesses watched her get into a older model Ford Galaxy or LTD, red in color. The door had to be assisted and been opened by the driver, and so we had 2 males and 2 females that witnessed that occurrence back in 1981. 30 minutes later at 7:30 a.m. she didn't show up for work, and the manager contacted her mother, asked where she was at. Mother said that she should be at work and was concerned, obviously. 5 days later, Jeannie Moore's body was found murdered up in Genesee Park on August 30th of 1981. Some picnickers were up there, and they were walking through the area, and they found her. And that's where the investigation with the Jefferson County Sheriff's Office got involved. And over those many years, there's been thousands and thousands of hours dedicated to Jeannie Moore's case, along with the other cold cases that we have. And a lot of investigators over the years from 1981 till now have dedicated a large amount of work to get to where we're at. In 2008, this case was re-examined, re-looked at. The evidence that was collected back in 1981 was re-examined, obviously, for new technology, specifically DNA purposes. In 2011, that evidence was submitted to CBI at the time, and a DNA profile was developed that was eligible to go into CODIS. And so that DNA profile was uploaded in 2011, and with no successful hits, where that DNA profile in CODIS remains to this day. In 2019, around May of this year, we were able to re-look into this case with the specific thought process of using forensic genetic genealogy and the advancements that have happened in that field over the last 18 months. So we were able to look at our DNA through our Jeffco regional lab and our DNA scientists that we have here at the Sheriff's Office. And we reached out when we realized that our DNA profile was conducive for this testing. And we reached out to Mitch Morrissey and his company, United Data Connect, and also working with Crime Stoppers, who was funding some of this research, this technology, and these advancements. So what we ultimately did was submitted our DNA to United Data Connect, and they developed a SNP profile, which is what is used in genealogy research. Similar to you folks would be, I can explain it to, similar to Ancestry, 23andMe, gene by gene, those kind of things. Once that SNP profile was developed, we were able to get that SNP profile back, and then United Data Connect was able to use a genealogist who was employed by them, and were able to start looking at, through public databases, start looking for ancestry matches to our unknown DNA profile that we've had from the evidence collected back in 1981. So I'd like to, can I move this? Is that okay? So I'd like to just give you guys a kind of a visual representation of what happened. There's a lot that I can talk about, but I'll try to condense it down and then let Mitch talk about some things also. What we were able to do was we were able to load our, Mitch was able to load our SNP profile up into this ancestry databases. We are able to get a match of family members to our unknown suspect. After we were able to get a match of potential family members to our unknown suspect, we were able to build, and United Data Connect was able to build backwards for interpretation, backwards in a genetic tree to identify a potential suspect. Through that building of the family tree and through some investigation on our part, we were able to come up with a potential suspect. And you see Donald Perea there. Through that background and history and research in him, we were able to determine that he died of health reasons back in 2012. I was able to, along with work from other investigators here at the Sheriff's Office, we were able to contact his biological daughter. I just want to stop here for 1 second and just let you folks know that we would not be here today if it wasn't for the gracious gratitude and help of his family members in helping identify that he was the suspect and to give us closure in that case. So we were able to collect DNA from his biological daughter, and then we were able to submit that DNA to our scientists here at the Jeffco Sheriff's Office, and we were able to confirm that Donald was and is the suspect to Jeannie Moore's murder.
Good morning, I'm Mitch Morrissey. I am the former District Attorney of Denver. I am currently the Chief Operating Officer of United Data Connect. Actually, the investigator did a great job of laying out what happened here, so I want to thank some people, but this is an individual that had a history. He was a rapist. If you run his criminal history, you'll know he was a rapist. But the one thing we at United Data Connect was able to do is uncover the fact that not only he was a rapist and a convicted rapist, he also was a murderer. And he murdered this young woman, and it was a tragedy for all of us. But this is the third murder that we've solved at United Data Connect. The first two were out of state. We solved a home invasion murder down in Arizona and a home invasion murder out in Utah. We used our familial search software to help those states and those investigators solve those cases. But this one means a lot to us because I grew up in Jefferson County. My mom, my wife's family, we all still live here in Jefferson County. This is the first case that we've been successful in Colorado. It is genetic genealogy and not our software, but we were able to solve this case. I want to thank the Sheriff's Office for working with us, and they were always top-notch, incredible group to work with. This investigator, I've worked with a lot of investigators in 35 years, 37 years. This is one of the best investigators that I ever worked with. The leads we gave him, he ran them down promptly, and we got here today because of him. I also got to work with someone that I've worked with in Denver when she was at the Denver Crime Lab. She really was the lead from the lab in this case, and without her work, without her preparation of the sample, getting it ready to go, and then the follow-up work that the investigator talked about that had to be done in this case because the individual was dead. So additional DNA had to be done. We had to do a reverse paternity to get the statistic that's being quoted to you today to get to this final solution. I want to thank my genealogist. She'd be here today, but she's on vacation Ireland, so maybe we pay her too much. But I talked to her yesterday, and she was extremely excited to be part of the team, and that's Joan Bussey. Joan was just overwhelmed when she, gave the person of interest, and then they ran down and were able to conclude that all of her work was valid and everything that she did. And I cannot say enough about Metro Denver Crime Stoppers. Metro Denver Crime Stoppers makes a difference in every community in the metro area with the work that they've done for years and years. I think they started about the time that this case happened, and they've made a difference. They helped us in Denver a lot, but they've stepped out. They kind of stepped out of their normal routine to help solve cold cases for law enforcement in the metro area. And we're working on other cases, and we're hoping to announce other successes in the future, but none of this would happen if it wasn't for Crime Stoppers. Crime Stoppers is funding us to do this work, and that is incredible. It's a national model. I don't believe there's anywhere else in the country or in the world where you have a nonprofit that is stepping up and trying to actually solve these cold cases using cutting-edge technology. The investigator told you that this has been basically around for 18 months. And one of my partners was one of the advisors on the original case. He was called and answered some questions that helped get the Golden State Killer. And so we're just excited to have brought this to Colorado and to make this part of law enforcement when it comes to solving cold cases. There's an old saying when you have cold cases, and I got to tell you, this sheriff's an exception. You can do something or you can do nothing. And sadly, there's a lot of places in the United States where they do nothing when it comes to cold cases. This department is an exception. They have a cold case unit, and they're doing something. And hopefully we can work with them again, and we can do something on another case for another family. I get contacts all the time from the community. Are you looking at this case? Old detectives and investigators that say, this one keeps me up at night, Mitch. Are you guys working on that one? And I'm just proud to say that we are working on a lot of these cases. And I want to thank the sheriff for his work here. It has an impact on his department. He's talked about the impact that it's had on this family. And when we solve cases like this, I really believe that it has an impact on our community. And so I'll be here to answer any questions, and I'll turn it over to Mike Mills from Crime Stoppers.
Thank you all for being here, and thanks for having me here. Less than 6 months ago, Mitch and I started talking about this program, and who would have thought that within 6 months we'd have our first solve. I'm grateful for this opportunity to speak on behalf of Metro Denver Crime Stoppers and its board and its coordinator, Sherry Duran. But there are many other people that made this happen. We provided some funding. That was just the start. First of all, I want to thank Sheriff Jeff Schrader, Investigator Elias Alberti, and the many others within the staff over 38 years that have put time in and have spent sleepless nights thinking, why can't we solve this case? To my friend Mitch Morrissey, obviously for coming to Metro Denver Crime Stoppers. He's been a supporter as the DA, as a friend, as a neighbor. We get to talk about things often, generally Sunday nights late. To Joan Bussey, who is the chief genealogist for United Data Connect. When I met her about 5 months ago, I thought, this is a person that's passionate, has expertise, and is dedicated. And to put the work in that she put in, it's mind-boggling to have that type of passion. To our partners in the media, without you all getting the word out, whether it's a crime alert, whether it's a cold case, whether it's any information in the follow-up, to Deb Takahara, who 2 weeks ago, did a report about this program. And 2 weeks later, we're able to have a success. Thank you. To the other board members that are here, Danny Garacki, who's the vice president, Sarah Feldman Johnston, who's the secretary, and Tyler Ashley Garacki, who is our next gen board member or president, as well as the vice president. And of course, as I said earlier, Detective Sherry Duran, who is our Crime Stoppers coordinator. She does a great job. But most importantly, I want to thank our generous community who believes enough in our mission statement to make donations through our fundraising activities and online. These dollars have allowed us to responsibly spend some of those funds to help solve crimes, whether it's a cold case or a current case, which could, as Mitch said, 1981 is when Metro Denver Crime Stoppers was founded. Back then it was Denver Crime Stoppers. Now we have a reach through more than 43 agencies and good partnerships with all of those. We are the first Crime Stoppers program in the world that has committed funds and paid for genetic testing, initial reviews, and then the genealogy work. And to have a successful outcome within the first 6 months is beyond our wildest expectations. We have an additional 10 cases that we've agreed to fund, and we hope that we'll have more successes. But even with our successes, I know that there never really is closure for the families and friends of the victims. But I am positive that they now know that they have some new answers. Thank you.
Mitch, can I ask you a question in terms of, can you kind of explain for lay people the technology you use, and when you say you were looking at public databases, what does that mean?
Okay, well, the technology that we used here, as the investigator said, it's a different kind of testing. We sequence the DNA. So we have a lab that does the sequencing work for us. We get the sequencing back, and then that data can be uploaded to 2 different genetic databases. It's not Ancestry, it's not 23andMe. They will sequence your DNA, but we can't search those in law enforcement. So we use a open source website that's called GEDmatch, and it's GED and then the word match. It's an open source website, and in fact, anybody that has their Ancestry results or their 23andMe results that want to help law enforcement solve cases, go to GEDmatch, upload your data, and say yes to the question, do you want law enforcement to have access to that? There's another database. It costs a little bit of money. It's called Family Tree DNA. And actually, it was Family Tree DNA that gave us the most significant lead in this case. So for a few $100s, you can upload, law enforcement can upload their forensic sample into Family Tree. Of course, it's free to upload it into GEDmatch. And then you search for people that have common DNA to the DNA that you're looking for. So you're not analyzing the DNA itself. What you're doing is looking for people that are in the database that share common DNA. And then there's a whole system where genealogists can look at it and say, okay, based on how much is shared, this is likely a first cousin, or this is likely an uncle, or this is likely, some other relative. And basically what this allows you to do is go out to about 4th cousins, and on average a person has about 850 cousins out there in the world. Many of them they don't know. In fact, most of the people that you do your connections with have never even met the person that is actually the suspect. So what we were able to do through Family Tree DNA in this case is get a very close relative. The investigation included a discussion with that person, and then because the suspect, the person of interest that we provided, was dead, additional DNA testing needed to be done. In the normal case, if the person was alive, you'd just go get a sample from that person. Sometimes you might have to follow them around and see if they discarded their DNA or get a warrant for their DNA. There's different ways to do it. In this case, the individual was dead. There was no way to get his DNA without exhuming his body. It was much easier then to contact any of his offspring and the other parent of his offspring. Just like when the case in the state determines that somebody is the father of someone for child support purposes, it's the same kind of paternity test that's done based on DNA. That was done by the lab here in Jeffco, and the statistic that was quoted to you then is the statistic. I would tell you, based on the statistics in DNA, this is the guy. There's nobody else out there in the world that would have a statistic like we have in this case. This is the man that killed this victim some nearly 40 years ago.
Mitch, as someone who spent innumerable hours seeking justice for victims and families before, what does this technology mean to you?
Well, it's, the thing I always say about DNA is 90% of the victims of DNA are women. Obviously, this is an example. And then about 9.5% are kids. So this is a technology, and it's just added now to general forensic DNA technology that helps us solve crimes where women and children are the victims of the kind of sexual abuse and the kind of beating that this victim suffered in 1981. This is a technology that helps us get to the right person and hold them accountable. Really, for me, the only thing that is not a good thing about today is we can't hold this individual accountable because God took him before we got a chance. But I would like to have seen him held accountable for this murder. I would like to see him stand in court and have to answer for what he did to this victim. But this isn't the oldest case that we've solved. We solved one from 1980 back in Denver. And I saw the impact that that had on that family. That individual was alive. We were able to prosecute him. We got a first-degree murder conviction. This won't be the case here, but I'll tell you, the type of things that we talked about as far as closure, resolution, for all the people involved in this, it's a good day.
Mitch, have you had a chance to talk with the family?
No, I have not. The sheriff's department handled that. I don't have victim advocates. My role is to do this work and to give them a person of interest, and then their role is to do the victim contact and all of the phenomenal follow-up work. This is not easy to do. This genealogy is tough. And there's some cases even that we're working on today that we're not going to get to a resolution on, and that's sad. This is hard work. This is a lot of hours, and it's a lot of hours by the genealogist, and it's incredible hours by the investigators. And they were willing to step up and do that work in this case. The crime lab puts in its time. This is not something that's simple to do, but it's important to do.
Can you give us a better sense of the timelines? I know the Sheriff's Department said in May of 2019 they started looking into this and wanting to do the forensic, genealogy. From when they decided that, kind of how long did it take?
Well, what we had to do was an initial review of the DNA that they had in the case, and we do that as part of our structure. We can tell law enforcement, no, this case won't work. This DNA technology has limitations, just like every DNA technology that I've worked with since 1989. They all have things that limit your ability to use them. What limits our ability to sequence is if it's a 50-50 mixture or if you don't have enough DNA. You need a lot of DNA as opposed to the technology that's used here in the lab. So what we do is a review. We were able to review the DNA in this case. We were able to say, yes, it qualifies. There was enough DNA. There was enough single source DNA that we were able to get it to our lab, which is a SNPs or sequencing lab, like the investigator said. We got a profile. Once we got, and that took time because the lab's in Oklahoma, and the lab doesn't just run the case. They wait till they have a whole group of cases and group them together. So we had to wait, but we were lucky. We sent them 4 cases at once. So we filled the plate almost. And then when we got the results, you take the results and you put them in those databases that we talked about. The sheriff was smart enough to pay for the commercial one because he actually saved a lot of money because they raised the rate about 4 days later. So it cost him $100 as opposed to $700. So once we got that, then our genealogist went to work on it, and it took her probably 40 to 60 hours to get to the person of interest that we're here today talking about. And what was described to you about how she goes up and down through the family trees that she creates. You know, you get up to a common great-grandfather, what you're looking for is people that are in common from two different families, and then see where they intersect through things like obituaries and birth notifications and all of those kind of databases to finally get to this individual. And we were able to do that because not only we got to the person of interest, but we also had a family that was willing to work with us and give us information and give us additional DNA that we needed.
So it sounds like once she got that information, it took her 40 to 60 hours, though. That's pretty remarkable.
Yeah, it took her that much time, and that you know, they don't all work like that. I mean, I wish they did, but they don't. But then the hours that were, then the investigator takes back over again, and those hours that he has to put in, those legwork, going out of state to talk to relatives, getting samples that then the crime lab needs to run, because you want that comparison of the STR technology that you've got from the crime scene in profile. You want that comparison done with either the suspect or the suspect's family to get to where we are today.
Mitch, you mentioned the lengthy criminal history. Can you explain how he kind of flew under the radar and no CODIS hits? And then also, is he a suspect in any other cases?
What I can tell you, and I'm going to have the investigator describe his criminal history, he was on bond for rape when he did this case, is my understanding. So he had been arrested for a sexual assault where he had a weapon, and he had been charged with that crime. But he had posted bond and was out when he picked up this victim and did what he did to her. He eventually got convicted for that crime. I think the question's better for the investigator to answer as far as anything else about his criminal history.
Yeah, so he did have a criminal history, and why he flew under the radar is he was arrested April 3rd of 1981 for violent sex assault and kidnapping out of Westminster. He was out on bond or a book through, the best that I can tell, from 1981. A lot of those, some of the trials that we have in cold cases, a lot of those records have been destroyed or not kept after 38 years. But best I can tell, he was either on bond or a book through was completed. He was awaiting the court history or court case when he committed the sex assault and murder of Jeannie Moore. So the reason he flew under the radar is he did go to prison from 1982 to 1985. After he got out in 1985, he has some minimal criminal history, really 2 traffic offenses and 2 other misdemeanor assault cases, one of them being a domestic violence case. But other than that, there is no criminal history of a violent felony or him being into CODIS. As some of you guys know, CODIS doesn't really come into play. DNA and coded databases doesn't really come into play until like 98, 99, 2000 time frame. He does not reoffend after that, and like I mentioned before, he was released from prison in 1985. So they weren't collecting. If you guys remember, they weren't collecting DNA cases or anything or samples like that in 1985 and for another 15 or so years after that.
Is he a suspect in any other cases?
So I don't know or have any knowledge of him being a suspect in any cases. Reference that his DNA obviously will still remain in CODIS. So obviously where it's been since 2011, it's a very good profile. And so as agencies around the Denver metro area or wherever start to look or get DNA like we were able to do in this case in 2011, they'll be able to find that comparison and find that match and be able to close more cases.
I have a question for Crime Stoppers. When you talk about how much funding was committed, what was that dollar figure for this case? Can you say?
So So United Data Connect, when we started, Mitch said, well, we can do one, but it really is better to do more than one because of how it's tested. So we committed $5,000 per case, so up to $50,000. This case was a $5,000 case, $4,000. Would normally be a $5,000 case for the funding. And like I said, we have 5 others with United Data Connect, and then 5 others with the Denver Police Department as well. And so,
I can tell you what happened. We wanted to be part of this so much that we gave them a break in the cost. We said, if you do 6 cases, it'll be better for us, and we will give you $1,000 off the cost. So we usually charge $5,000, but because it was Crime Stoppers, because we knew they were a nonprofit, I know how they raise their money because I used to do. I used to be on their board, and we used to raise money through those shred-a-thons, and that was a lot of work. We gave them a break in cost so we could be part of this team, and it's paid off, I think, for everybody.
Is that a small price to pay to solve this case?
Yes, it is.
yes, it is. Yeah.